Welcome to Kit's Rock Review here on the internet. Well, I'm not going to have a big introduction. I'm just going to hit the present so you can see what's going on. Okay, here we are, Kit's Rock Review, and there's my little opening montage. Bar of Neon Project presents Kit's Rock Review. And there's me with my ukulele over in the corner. Then there's me with Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi of the Tedeschi Trucks Band. And let's get started. Why don't we? Okay. So don't forget, if you're on Facebook, like and follow Kit's Rock Review and the Barroom Neon Project. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe to Kit's Rock Review and the Barroom Neon Project. Let's get those likes, subscriptions, followers up. Okay, for both Kit's Rock Review and the Barroom Neon Project. Okay, before we begin, we're going to start with a Kit's Rock Review recommendation. And it's sort of a sequel to the recommendation I made last month on the Barroom Neon Project show. So last month I recommended Daisy Jones and the Six, the series that's on Amazon Prime. This month I am still recommending Daisy Jones and the Six, but instead of the streaming show, I'm recommending the book Daisy Jones and the Six. Now, of course, you know, books are always better. I really like the show. I also really like the book, and we all know that books are better than the show. Always. I mean, watch the Harry Potter books versus the Harry Potter TV series. Well, there is going to be Harry Potter TV, but the Harry Potter books versus the Harry Potter movies. The Lord of the Rings novels versus the Lord of the Rings books. They're always better. But this, obviously, there's differences. Especially the big difference is how Daisy Jones joins the band. It's different in the book than it is on the TV show. I like the book a lot because it describes sort of, it was a little, I mean, the show shows them writing songs. The book, I feel, does a better job with showing them writing the songs and discussing them writing the songs. I mean, I did get the soundtrack. Yep, right here. I got the soundtrack to the TV show, but the songs on this are different than the songs in this. So anyway, Kit's Rock Review recommendation, Daisy Jones and the Six, a book that the TV show is based on. A little different. Still both are great, but I recommend them both. But read this. It's awesome. As you can see, I'm not quite done with it. Point I'm in, they're recording their album, Aurora. So I still got their Aurora tour to go on. And it's presented just like the show is done in documentary style. This is done in documentary style. I don't know if you can see how well you can see on that, but it, you know, it'll have dialogue from each of the characters like they're being interviewed. Okay, so that's Kit's Rock Review recommendation, Daisy Jones and the Six, the novel, to supplement Daisy Jones and the Six, the TV series. Okay, so as I said last time, today's topic is, it's a sequel to what I did. Last time I did rock and roll songs that were about rock and roll that contain the word rock. Today we got songs about rock and roll that do not contain the word rock. I should have put a little on the presentation. I should have put a little X through the rock there. But I got 10 songs. I've put them roughly in chronological order. So we'll go through them. They're not necessarily the best songs about rock and roll that don't contain the word rock, but they're 10 songs that I thought of when I started writing this. And of course, I had to do my research, which means I had to listen to all of them. So I said they're roughly in chronological order. So the first song goes all the way back to the 1950s. It is Johnny B. Good by Chuck Berry. And it probably has one of the most well-known opening guitar riffs in rock and roll history. But Chuck Berry actually borrowed that riff from a 1940 song. The 1940 song was called Ain't That Just Like a Woman from Louis Jordan. And that song doesn't have the riff at the beginning. It's somewhere in the middle. But Chuck Berry borrowed that riff for the song, changed it a little bit. So it's not, you know, he's not going to get any copyright issues. He wrote it in 1955 and didn't record it until 1958. The song's about a country boy who would play a guitar just like ringing a bell, you know the lyric, and becomes a famous musician. The lyrics for the song are actually based on the life of Johnny Johnson, who was a piano player, but Chuck Berry changed the lyrics around a bit to be about a guitar player because Chuck Berry's a guitar player, and Johnny Johnson was in his band. And in 1991, Johnny Johnson actually recorded an album called Johnny Be Bad, which was, sort of a reference to him being the basis for Johnny Be Good. The song itself is number 7 on Rolling Stone magazine's greatest songs of all time. And the song itself, Chuck Berry's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The song itself is also in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as one of the 500 songs that influenced and shaped rock and roll. And of course, people my age will know Johnny Be Good from the movie Back to the Future, where Marty McFly plays the song at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. It introduces the world to rock and roll, or at least in the Back to the Future universe. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to move on to the 1970s, early 1970s. 1971. This song was released the year I was born. American Pie, folk rock song. It's about the history of rock and roll from the 1950s to the early 70s. And it Don McLean was inspired to write the song when he was, again, reading about the death of Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper. That, of course, is known as the day the music died. And actually, as a young kid, Don McLean did deliver newspapers, and he remembers folding up the newspapers with the headline, "The Day the Music Died." And every February, that's the beginning of the song about him doing that. But anyway, Don McLean is never he's sort of refused to tell exactly what all the images in the song are about. He says it's poetry. It's supposed to be open to interpretation. People are supposed to put their own impressions on it. So he hasn't told what the song is about, but that's not prevented other people from interpreting the song. And here's some of the popular notions about what the song is. At the beginning of the song, there's a king and queen. Some people think that refers to the king and queen of folk music, which would be Pete Seeger and Joan Baez. Later on, there's another king in the song, and a lot of people think that's Elvis Presley, because Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll. There's a jester who is in the sideline on a cast, and a lot of people think that's Bob Dylan, because in the late 60s, Bob Dylan was in a motorcycle accident and was convalescent and couldn't go on tour. That's also the time, by the way, a little rock and roll history, where Bob Dylan ended up going to the band's house, Big Pink, in Woodstock, and recording the basement tapes with them. Anyway, also there's a sergeant that played a marching tune. A lot of people think that's the Beatles. There's the Birds That Fly High, 8 Miles High, as a matter of fact, and obviously that's a reference to the Byrds, who had a song called 8 Miles High. There's Jack Flash, who sat on a candlestick, which a lot of people think is the Rolling Stones. It is the Rolling Stones. Where else would you get Jack Flash? Anyway, there's also a woman who sang the blues, a girl who sang the blues. And a lot of people believe that refers to Janis Joplin. The song itself is 8 minutes long. That's a long song. But back in 1970, you had a little single 45, about that big. You could fit about 5 minutes on each side. So what they did is the first 4.5 minutes they put on one side, the next 4.5 minutes they put on the other side. So when you bought the single, you actually had to flip it over to hear the whole song. Radio stations, however, didn't do that. They just got the LP, the long player, and put it on and played the album track instead. It went to number 1, and for 50 years, American Pie held the record as being the longest number 1 single in Billboard history. That was broken 2 years ago in 2021 when a song by Miss Taylor Swift, All Too Well, was 10 minutes long and hit number 1. So it took Taylor Swift to break a record by Don McLean. I'm not quite sure what to think about that, but that's a fact for you. Okay, so let's move on. We're still in the 70s. The cover of Rolling Stone by Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. By the way, that name was influenced the Muppets, by the way, because the Muppet Band is Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. Anyway, they had a song called The Cover of Rolling Stone, and it's a satirical song about trying to become famous and being a rock star. And this band in the song wonders why they can't get on the cover of Rolling Stone, because they do all the stuff that famous rock bands do. They use drugs. They have teenage groupies. They have a frantic guitar solo, but they can't get on the cover of Rolling Stone. And I think the Dr. Hook and Dr. Hook and Medicine Show did admit they recorded that song in an attempt to get on the cover of Rolling Stone, which, as you can see from my picture here, they did get on the cover of Rolling Stone. Although they didn't get, like, normally when you get on the cover of Rolling Stone, you have a picture. So they got a cartoon caricature of the band, and Rolling Stone didn't even put their name on the cover. They called them What's Their Names. But anyway, it did work. They did get on the cover of Rolling Stone. Another interesting fact is BBC Radio refused to play the song. Not because of the drug reference. They refused to play the song because BBC Radio had this policy against commercial entities being... Rolling Stone itself is a commercial magazine, a commercial publication. BBC Radio figured it was really an ad for Rolling Stone, so they refused to play the song. So a bunch of BBC DJs, they got together, they recorded over the chorus to say on the cover of Times Radio, or Radio Times. So the British version, even though the title of the song is Cover of Rolling Stone, if you listen to it in Britain, it's called The Cover of Radio Times. Interesting little fact about the song. So we're going to still stick with the 70s, and we're going to move on to a little Grand Funk Railroad. And obviously, guess what? They're an American band, if you didn't know. That's the title of the single they released. And the song was actually written by their drummer, Don Brewer. And it's an autobiographical. It actually happened. It's about a tour they took in the late 60s, early 70s, where they were in the South, in Arkansas and Omaha. The first verse is about a legendary groupie whose name was Connie Hamzy. I actually looked her up. She actually was a groupie who hung out with bands and probably did a few other things with bands too. And later in that same first verse, they hang out with Freddie King, who's a legendary blues guitarist. Sweet, sweet Connie doing her act. She had the whole show, and that's a national fact. Up All Night with Freddie King, I got to tell you, poker is his thing. Then the second verse is about how they went to Omaha and partied with a bunch of groupies. Now, these fine ladies, they had a plan. They were out to meet the boys in the band. They said, come on, dudes, let's get it on. And we proceeded to tear that hotel down because we're an American band. And by the way, that song, We're an American Band, it is when VH1 actually was a music station, they did a bunch of these lists, and they had a list of the top 100 hard rock songs of all time. And We're an American Band, they included on that list. Yay. Wish VH1 would go back to that music, but hey, I'm not a TV executive. I don't make my money on TV. Anyway, we're still in the 70s. We're in the mid-70s now. Shooting Star by Bad Company. This is another song about the rise of a rock star. In fact, Paul Rodgers, he was actually inspired by the lives of Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, and Jimi Hendrix when he wrote this song. And he said it's almost a 70s version of Johnny B. Good, but the ending is different because Johnny B. Good, he becomes rich and famous. The ending of Shooting Star, he passes away. I mean, Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song. Love Me Do It was, I think it was. Got himself a guitar, used to play every night. Now he's in a rock and roll outfit and everything's all right. As I said, but unlike Johnny B. Good, Johnny from this song doesn't end up all good. Johnny died one night, died in his bed. Bottle of whiskey, sleeping tablets by his head. However, he's still around. If you listen to the wind, you can still hear him play. So don't you know that you're a shooting star? So, just like Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, even though they're not around, if you listen, you can still hear him play. That's almost the theme of Neil Young with his Hey Hey, My, Into the Black with Neil Young and Crazy Horse from their Rust Never Sleeps album. This is one of two songs that bookend the album. This is the electric song that ends the album. Then there's an acoustic song called My, Hey Hey, Out of the Blue, which starts the album. So they sort of, it's sort of supposed to be thematic, I guess. So the song actually is about Johnny Rotten from the punk band the Sex Pistols and how he was a bad influence. And Neil Young compares him to Elvis Presley, the King, who in the 50s was considered a bad influence. Well, he says the King is gone, but he's not forgotten. This is the story of the Johnny Rotten. That's Neil Young comparing the music of the 50s to the music of the late 70s. And the line, Russ never sleeps, he actually got that from the band Devo. Mark Mothersbaugh, I believe that's how you say it, the leader of Devo, used to be a graphic artist. And he remembers this one rust-proofing brand that he had to work on. And their line was, Russ never sleeps, so you got to get our rust protection. And Devo was actually working with Neil Young on a film called Human Highway. They appeared in it was a Neil Young film, and Devo appeared in it. And he was telling him the story about that, and Neil's like, hey, I like that line. I'm going to use it in a song. So you can thank Devo for the Russ Never Sleeps line in Hey, Hey, My, My. So we're actually going to finally leave the 1970s. Got a lot of songs from the 70s. And we're going to move into the 80s. Actually, barely into the 80s. We got Duchess by Genesis. This is the second track on the Duke album. By the way, Duke is my favorite Phil Collins era Genesis album. And it's part of a suite of songs. The suite of songs is, they originally wrote these songs as one suite. It was supposed to be a story called The Story of Albert. But then they didn't want to be compared to some of the stuff they did with Peter Gabriel, so they broke the songs up. But anyway, the Duchess is part of this suite, and in concert they played the suite continuously together. The other songs that are part of that suite are Behind the Lines, Guide Vocal, Turn It On Again, Duke's Travel, and Duke's End. In the suite, it's called The Story of Albert, the suite, and at one point Albert is turned on the radio, listening to a song by the Duchess, and the Duchess is the story of her career. At the start of the song, Duchess dreams of hitting it big, becoming a big star, but her music is more important than her stardom. In the middle of the song, she has all this fame, and she has this success, and she's a big star. And every time she hits the stage, people cheer, yay! At the end of the song, however, she struggles to stay relevant. Her singles aren't doing as well. And she wants to do what the audience wants, but the quality of her music starts to suffer. And so she decides to retire. And actually, Tony Banks, who was the lyricist for that song, he's actually said that the reason Genesis stopped after the Calling All Stations album in the late 90s is because he didn't want to be like Duchess. The Calling All Stations album didn't do as well, and he didn't want to start trying to figure out what the audience wanted to hear, so he and Mike Rutherford ended the band. But they did actually play Duchess on their reunion tour last year. I was hoping they'd play all of Duke, but, I'm not Genesis, and probably people would be a little disappointed if they did, but I would have been, at least at 2 shows, I would have been very happy if they played all of the Duke album. But I did get to hear Duchess, which I was very surprised when I did hear Duchess. So we're going to stick in the 80s. We're still in the early 80s here. We got Foreigner with Jukebox Hero, which is another song about Jukebox Hero. It's a song about a guy who becomes famous by listening a song that becomes famous on the radio. So it's from one of their early albums, written by Mick Jones and oh God, I can't remember his name, and I forgot to write it down. Guy from Rochester, New York. Oh well. Anyway, Jukebox Hero. Look it up. By Foreigner. So we'll continue with the 80s. I'll stop embarrassing myself. We'll actually go to the late 80s. This time, this is a song that came out on my 18th birthday in 1989. So it's not as famous a song as a lot of the others in this list. But I have fond memories of it because it came out on my 18th birthday, my senior year of high school. So the end of my senior year, I remember listening to this song all the time. It's about how music can heal you. It was written by Tom Johnston, who was the original lead singer of the Doobie Brothers. And this is his first, because he left the band in the mid-70s, and this is the first lead single that he sang since 1976. As I said, it's about how music can heal you. Music is the doctor. It makes you feel like you want to. Got to listen to the doctor just like you ought to. Music is the doctor of my soul. And I just have, whenever I hear this song, I have fond memories of it, and it brings me back to that late high school, very late high school of my senior year. So if you can, look it up. It's an awesome song. It's very Doobie Brother-ish. It's not the Michael McDonald Doobie Brother era of What a Fool Believes. It's, the early China Grove, listen to the music type of song by the Doobie Brothers. Okay, I think I got one more song in here. And yes, I do. And this is from when I was in college. Into the Great Wide Open by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, the title track of their 8th studio album. And this album, Tom Petty was trying to sort of integrate Jeff Lynne into the Heartbreakers. Jeff Lynne produced. He'd never officially joined the Heartbreakers, but he produced Into the Great Wide Album, the album Into the Great Wide Open, of which this is a song that he and Tom Petty wrote. Jeff Lynne, of course, worked with Tom Petty on Tom Petty's solo album, Full Moon Fever, and of course worked with him in a little minor group called the Traveling Wilburys. This is a song about a character named Eddie Rebel, who Eddie waited till he finished high school, and then he went and moved into Hollywood and became famous. But basically, the song goes, went to Hollywood and became a star. So he met a girl. She taught him some chords. He joined a band. They became famous. And then, of course, the song ends with the A&R man says, I don't hear a single. So the A&R man might, there's a little, I don't know, mixed message at the end because he's famous, but the A&R man wants to hear a single out of his song. So maybe the quality of his music is going to suffer because the music isn't important. But that's just my interpretation. The song itself on the album is only 3.5 minutes long, but they actually ended up making a 6-minute video for it, which starred Johnny Depp, by the way, and Faye Dunaway. They were actually making a movie at the time, and the movie had paused for a bit, so that a lot of the actors from that movie actually appear in the video. But the video itself is like 6 minutes long because they filmed so much for it to tell the entire story. So they had to add this instrumental section, and I love the instrumental section in the video. I wish they'd released it as a single. I might have released it as a single. I've never seen it anywhere because it has this great keyboard solo by Heartbreaker Benmont Tench that I really love this, but I never knew where to find it. I might have to go check it out and see if I can find the extended version. I mean, I can find the extended version as a video, but I just want the song itself. Anyway, so those are my songs about rock and roll that do not contain the word rock. Let me know what you think about them in the comments. Are there any others about those songs? Let me know what you think about those songs. Are there any other songs about rock and roll that do not contain the word rock that you know of? There probably are. These are just the 10 that I thought of when I was making this list. I also still want to know, please tell me in the comments, what other subjects you want me to do on Kits Rock Review. And I'll tell you next time on the Barroom Neon Project show, I'm going to do, with my Kits Rock Review segment, I'm going to do bands that have changed lead singers. So think Van Halen, think Genesis, AC/DC. Hey, and I just thought of one today, right now doing this, the Doobie Brothers. So if you have any, I'm going to write that down right now. If you know, I can think of any bands that have changed their lead singers, let me know, put it in the comments. And of course, as always, until next time, what do? We follow Neil Young's advice, and Neil Young's advice is not fade out. It's better to fade out, better to burn out than to fade away. The advice we follow from Neil Young is keep on rocking in the free world. So until next time, let's do just that. Let's keep on rocking in the free world. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.